So I've been listening a little bit to Justin Khan. That's the guy behind, or what, who was behind Twitch. He and Emmett. They were. So anyway, this guy. I guess the streaming service Twitch was sold for nearly $1 billion to Amazon. And there's been a couple of things that that he's been talking about that I sort of liked the ideas and wanted to share some thoughts. So he was giving in a speech where he was talking to some young graduates. He gave the advice that he was given when he was younger by one of his teachers about writing. And the teacher had said to him, had said to them, to their class, basically, if if you want to write something, the first thing you should do is just write a shitty first draft, which is probably good advice actually in more ways than one. Like you can look at it for writing, but you can also look at it in terms of business building or pretty much anything else. So one of the ways I've been implementing that is I've been trying to get some good email writing happening, to outsource email writing, and it's kind of tough. It's not the easiest thing to outsource. My voice is not the easiest to replicate, and so it's been difficult to find the right workflow to get that going. And sometimes, there's just so much work involved. Like basically, I'll get a piece of writing back, which is, not a bad piece of writing, honestly, but it's just not me. So I'll take it and I'll pretty much rewrite the whole thing. And so, the question that naturally that one starts to ask is, maybe you should just write it from the beginning to start with, rather than getting somebody to do it. Since you're writing it anyway, it's just taking the same amount of time. In fact, it's taking longer now because there's a bit of back and forth about that. But what's actually been good about it, one of the things that I've liked, so I'm not, ready to give up just yet. There's plenty of ideas on what to do. But one of the things I've liked about it is basically that I get a first draft. It's not ready. It's not production ready. But it is a first draft, and it's better than not having anything to start with at all. In fact, this is where most of sometimes when you sit down to write, it's like, oh, what am I going to write about today, or what am I going to, what angle am I going to hit, or whatever it is. But just having something that is that's there in front of you is way easier to work with. It's so much easier for me to edit something that is not right, that's not perfect, that's not good, or to rewrite even something that's not good, than it is to come up with something from scratch, to come up with a new idea every single time. So that's one way to look at following that advice. Obviously, in terms of writing, it's always a good idea to start with somewhere, start with something. He talked about it in terms of business and having a startup. And what he did, he described a particular startup that they had come up with and the experience, which I think is a little bit exaggerated in how goofy and clueless they were, as he talked about it. But all the same, he describes an experience where they'd basically come up with sort of a silly startup idea. It was like a calendar. This is before Google Calendar came out, and they, very poorly researched. They didn't really know a lot about coding and so on. They put it together and managed to basically eventually sell that business, which he still claims was not a very good business. They were able to sell it for something near $200,000 $200,000 or so, which is, you know, not bad. Considering it was their first attempt. Again, that's really good advice. Like if you're just starting out, or you're trying to start out, you're working through the brand plan, for instance, in the super traffic machine, and you're like, oh, I don't know if this is good or if it's going to be any good. Well, just run it, do it, finish it out, because you'll have something to work from that you can improve, rather than having nothing where you've got nothing to improve. If you sit there and you just get stuck in inaction, and in indecision, and you want to make it perfect, and you want to choose the exact right idea, and you want to be true to the instructions, which is all well and good. I mean, you should do your best to stick to the plan, but if you're finding that is getting in the way of actually making progress, make progress ahead of prioritizing the plan. Don't worry about getting it perfect. Get it done, and then you can always improve that. You can always improve from that. Now, I don't. That's not really advice that I necessarily follow easily. I tend to not like anything that is that feels rushed or not well thought out. I like for things to be well thought out. I will allow things to take much longer than they need to in order to get them done perfectly and, well, done well, I guess. But there is a difference, and the difference is that with me, being slow in order to get a good quality thing out, does not mean inaction. It doesn't mean that I stop and I'm just sitting there going, oh, it's got to be perfect, therefore I'm going to just sit here and do nothing because it's not perfect, which is what a lot of people actually do. They get stuck in that indecision, where they're trying to figure out that they give themselves the excuse that it's not quite right, it's not quite there, it's not fitting, and they don't actually do anything. They're just looking at it, basically almost giving up. Whereas on the other hand, I am making forward progress is just slow, because I am trying to do, to produce something that is good. Ultimately, I finish. It takes more time and work than it should, but the end result is pretty decent. And I think that there is something to be said for prioritizing quality. If that is what you're doing, I don't think that you should rush. But if you find often that things are not happening the way that they should, because you're stuck, because you're slowing yourself down through trying to get things perfect, then you need to figure out how to get rid of that bottleneck. So I'll give you an example with the email writing. So we're about to test out a new strategy to do this, and I switch strategies from time to time. So obviously I've been way too busy to send emails lately. I come to you guys doing these videos at the end of the night. It's just about midnight now. I've seen a couple of the videos where my eyes look completely destroyed, and that isn't an accident. I basically, I'm like right at the end of my day when I do these videos. I'm working the whole day. I don't really have a whole lot of time. So the fact that emails aren't going out is not really because I'm too lazy or not disciplined enough to do them. It's just that I'm prioritizing right now producing the material that's supposed to come out at the end of the month for our current customers, for our current subscribers. And I want to make sure that they are served properly before I try to recruit more customers, which is the purpose of sending out more emails, to recruit more customers, which is also important, but it's not as important as keeping my current customers happy. So I do have somebody, I have two writers who produce emails. I've got a stack of emails written that are just sitting there waiting for me to review and finalize and send out. So I've been the bottleneck essentially in my own thing, because I'm not willing to send out the emails as they stand, the way that they are. And so I've been sort of standing in my own way. And the way that I'm dealing with that now, or I'm trying to deal with it, is we'll see how this works out, is I have now asked the email writers to be responsible for the sending for, so this used to be my responsibility. I give it the final edit, then I put it in the autoresponder and send it. And I'll actually spend a decent amount of time getting it formatted correctly in the autoresponder before sending it out. So that, like, apart from the editing and the multiple episodes of me, going over and editing the email and so on, there's a bunch of time that is spent just formatting it. It's technical. Anybody could do that. It's not really the kind of, high level skilled work that you really need somebody quite special to do. So I've shifted that responsibility from myself and said, well, look, you are ultimately responsible. The writer is ultimately responsible for sending out the email and getting it out. I still need to edit the email, so that's not off my plate yet. But what I've done is I've said to the writer, you ask me to send, like, you pick the email, you tell me which one you want to send out, give me an opportunity to edit it, remind me throughout the day. If I don't get around to it, you have my authority to then, if I don't respond within 24 hours with a review, you send it out. And in that way, I've got out of my own way, send out the shitty draft or whatever it is, whatever level of draft it is, if that's what it ends up being, because it's better than nothing. The same thing with these videos. I've been sort of holding back on doing video because I've got to get the right everything, and now I'm like, no, you know what? I'm just gonna do it in the most efficient way that's possible. Don't need to perfect it, don't need to edit it. Let's get it out there, see how it goes, and if it turns out that this idea is a good one, then we'll turn it into something. We'll invest more time and effort into it. So that's my thoughts on the shitty first draft idea. There's another cool thing that he talked about, which I thought was worth mentioning, and I don't want to do another video so you don't think I've got a new crush. I'm cheating on my man Elon. So the idea was, he was talking about my wife's having a little giggle over there. She thought that was funny. So what was it? Where was I? He was talking about the idea of the kind of business to get into, and this is kind of some high level stuff. This is coming from a guy who built a business that sold for nearly $1 billion, and has had multiple startup businesses since that have done well. So he talked about this concept of the kind of business that you should get into. And he says that when you're young and you're not, basically you don't have anything going for you. You got nothing to lose, right? Your advantage is that you have nothing to lose. And so what you could do is take on a business where it's a audience risk or a consumer risk. What that means is that you're basically, you're looking out for the kind of business that you would get into would take a risk basically on who the audience is. You can come up with something like, Twitch, which was kind of, it's a little bit crazy to, it's the ultimate, uses the consumer, you're watching somebody else, you're consuming somebody else consuming a video game, which is, it's kind of a out there crazy idea. So it says that you can take a risk with a business like that because more experienced players will typically not take those kind of risks. So that's your advantage, that you don't have anything to lose. You can easily pivot. You can change your audience. You can change your market. So that's the risk. You look at who you can go after as a market. Whereas when you're more experienced and you are you've got more to lose basically. So basically in that market, the big player who would come in and compete with you is crazy. Like he would be crazy to come in and compete with you, and therefore you have free reign to do whatever you want in that. Whereas the experienced player, the right business for him to get into would be something with an execution risk. And what that means is that basically it's not necessarily a new idea, but it's an idea where the execution of that business is really where it's going to. So you need to have basically skills. You need to know how to handle this. How are you going to, deal with the delivery of this particular product? How are you going to execute the marketing? How would you, for instance, raise financing and so on, things like that. So there's like that kind of thing would be more suitable to a more experienced player, a bigger player. And in that case, if you're new to a market, you'd be crazy. If you're inexperienced, you would be crazy to jump in and compete with him. And so that was kind of a cool idea, because you could look at that from our industry's perspective. And I think that, for me, for instance, to go up against other internet marketers in internet marketing, that's something that is not really a problem. I can go up against them. I can still come out on top. I can do it better. Basically, I can do internet marketing better and beat them. But I've been at this game for more than a decade. I've been at it for more than a decade. I've got a lot of advantages now that would allow me to do that. And you'd be crazy to go up against me. Basically, you tried to somebody new to this market tries to come along and say, hey, you know what, I'm gonna try to be the PPC king or whatever. It'd be kind of hard for you to do that, to beat me at that game. But as a new player, as a less experienced player, you don't really have, like, it would be very stupid of me to try to switch now to a different line of business, to a different audience, for instance, because that would mean that everything that I've got, everything that I've invested would be completely lost. And I've actually thought about this many times before, and I'm like, this is, it would be very tough for me to start in a new market where I don't have a reputation already, and to make a go of that. So what you can do, if you're not in that position of experience, and you don't have anything to lose, is you have the ability to test out different ideas in front of different audiences. And so that's kind of where, like, in the brand plan, in the super traffic machine, we like, that's one of the things that I guess I try to get across this idea. Sometimes it's a little difficult for people to grasp, although we have quite a lot of examples and stuff. But I think it's sometimes people have a hard time in translating that to themselves, and how they might be able to do that. With their own ideas. But basically, you take whatever you want to do and put it in front of a different kind of an audience. So let's suppose you wanted to get into PPC traffic, and be some sort of a somebody who teaches PPC techniques. If you were to go up against me in the general market of internet marketers and PPC, and not just me, but against any of the other players that have been in that market for a while, it'll be very tough for you to do that. But what you could do is say, hey, I'm going to do PPC training for, let's say, I don't know, teachers. For school teachers who are trying to do some kind of I'm just throwing up a silly example here, but something out there, like teachers who are trying to do some part-time teaching on the side and make some money from that. That could be a thing. Or maybe you go after geezers and say, you know what, I'm gonna target old guys who are basically not very tech savvy, and I'm going to teach them how to do pay-per-click marketing. So now all of a sudden you're in a market of almost of your own creation. Now, the execution of that will obviously come back to, like, there's going to have to be some techniques to figure out how to do that exactly. I don't know how exactly you'd go about it. If it were me, maybe I wouldn't know how to do it. But that's the advantage that you have as somebody coming in with less skill rather and less experience, is that you can actually take a risk like that and go, you know what, let me see if that works, and you build a business around that, and you test it out, and if it doesn't seem to work, you can always pivot and change your direction and be like, okay, well, let's see if this would work for some other audience. And that would be a potential way to go. So this is kind of like this is what I would say is, I think that's really good advice to follow. It's that because I haven't had I guess I didn't have the proper way to verbalize this, but I've always said that I've always thought people were nuts for trying to get into these really competitive markets doing nothing. Like, you don't have the skill or the experience for it. You really don't have it. So why would you try to get into this market doing nothing fresh anyway? You're not going to be able to pull it off. It's just, there's way better players than you, and they're more likely to get that business than you will. People would rather hear, for instance, from Frank Kern about internet marketing than to hear from even me, I guess, in many cases. They'd rather hear from him than they would hear from some nobody that they don't even that has no name or reputation in the market. But if you changed who you're targeting with your marketing, who you're targeting with your with that same sort of product range, you'll find that you can actually do that uncontested, because this is an audience who's going to be like, Frank Kern who? That's basically what you would want to, that's what you'd want to go after. This is where you'd want to be. You don't want to go to anywhere where Frank Kern would be known. You'd want to go to a market where people would be like, well, who is that? So there's some creative ideas that you could play with in terms of who the audience is that you target with your business, and that's where I would really focus on, rather than not being creative on the audience and then having to make up for it with really good execution, which is going to be really tough for you to do. So yeah, that's all I got for you today. Let me know your thoughts.